Hi friends, welcome back. I was going to film a completely different video for you today, but the series I'm reading is driving me a little bit crazy and I need to talk about it. So today's video is going to be a little bit of a rant video about the His Dark Materials series by Philip Pullman. A lot of you are probably familiar with this series, you've probably already read it or seen the film That Was a Disaster, or the TV series that the BBC recently did. I will be discussing things that happen in both the second and third books, so if you haven't read them and don't want to get spoiled, then maybe this isn't the video for you. As we speak, I'm currently reading The Amber Spyglass as part of the Make Your Myth Take a Readathon. If you've seen my TBR announcement video, then you'll realise that this wasn't actually in my original TBR, but I swapped it out in place of Dark Dawn because I didn't think it would come on time. Annoyingly, Dark Dawn came the day after I started this, so great. I'm currently 210 pages through this book. I'm on chapter 16 and it's an effort to carry on. And I'm so close to DNFing this. So close, and I don't know whether I should or whether I should just push through so I can say I finally finished the trilogy. One of the main problems I have with this book, and the series as a whole actually, is the depiction of Lyra. In the first book, Lyra is cool, she's badass, she's feisty, and she's not afraid to speak her mind. When we get to The Subtle Knife, however, she's kind of given a bit of a backseat. The new main character is called Will. He's a young boy. All of a sudden, Philip Pullman has decided that this is his hero story. Now, I wouldn't mind reading a story about Will if it had been set up that way, but The Northern Lights sets up a story about Lyra, a young girl. So going into The Subtle Knife is a little bit of a disappointment when all of a sudden it's about this boy that has come out of nowhere and is suddenly the hero and the one that's doing all the saving and looking after Lyra. Meanwhile, Lyra is kind of pushed to the side and she's almost a bit of a weakling compared to what she was in the first book. And that's really disappointing because I went into this thinking this was going to be a cool story about a cool young girl, but no. It's now male-centric. Lyra's just another side, whiny little girl, and we've just kind of lost that oomph that the first book had. The Subtle Knife for me was a massive letdown. I should really have taken that as a red flag to maybe not continue the series, but here we are, regretting all my decisions. The rampant misogyny in this series hurts me so much, especially because The Northern Lights is like this whole thing on its own. It's an amazing story, it's so well detailed, the characters are so well done, and then The Subtle Knife destroys all the goodness that the first book did. It's a whole new story, it's a new main character, it's almost like a spin-off to the original book, it doesn't feel like a follow-on as such. What I noticed particularly was the women in this series have just taken a back seat. They're weaker than they were in the first one. They have less screen time, essentially. They are not the powerful figures that Philip Pullman set them up to be. As I've already mentioned, Lyra goes from being a badass, feisty little girl to a bit of a weakling, a bit of a wimp, and all of a sudden she has to be protected by Will when she did everything for herself in the first book. But then we can take a look at the other female characters. Mrs. Coulter is perhaps one of the most scariest villains for children in the first book, and also in the TV series and the film. But in the second and third, she's not as great. I really liked that evilness to her character in the first book. She was cunning, she was clever, she had all these layers, and she would stop at nothing to serve her own interests. That surety kind of declines in the second and third book, especially in the third book. Like I say, I'm only 210 pages in, but already from what we've seen of her, she's completely reverted in a similar way that Lyra did between the first and second book. She's gone from being angry and self-serving and relentless to a bit silly. The plan that she made seems a bit pointless to me, and that sureness in herself has vanished in place of a more stereotypical weak mother figure thing. I don't really know how to describe her. Furthermore, we've got the new character Mary Malone, if you've read the second book. Mary is a scientist from our world, from Will's world, who Lyra finds and asks for help. Mary understands dust but calls it something different, and when we first meet her, she's really clever, she's really involved in her science, she's fascinated by Lyra and fascinated by dust, and she's working out whether she wants to help Lyra or not. So far in the third book, we've seen her a little bit. She's still a scientist, she's still really interested in the world around her and the different worlds that she's travelling through, but now she's taken on a new role, and this role kind of bleeds into my thoughts about the book in terms of its representation of religion and the church, but we'll get back to that properly in a bit. Mary has suddenly been revealed as the Tempter. Clearly this is a reference to the snake in the Garden of Eden. If you've read the books, then you get the whole gist. Philip Pullman's sort of retelling the creation story, sort of not. I'm still not really sure of it, and I've got 2/3 of the final book left. Mary has gone from being this independent, scientific, intelligent woman to a player in a man's creation story where she plays the devil, the snake, the tempter, the cause, arguably, of the damnation of all humanity. Not only is Mary one of the few women in this book the tempter, Lyra is Eve, and she is described as the reason for damnation. There was a specific quote that made me rage. Let me see if I can find that for you. The child then is in the position of Eve, the wife of Adam, the mother of us all, and the cause of all sin. Growing up in religious schools gives you a certain level of cynicism when it comes to religion and the church. I've heard and seen and read many retellings of the creation story, the idea of Eve, and I've seen a lot of adaptations from a feminist perspective and showing Eve not as the originator of sin, but as someone who was never told she had to follow man's rules and has been damned for all time because of it. Anyway, putting Lyra in the position of Eve was just ridiculous. I get that this is a religious story, I get that this has these religious connotations and undertones, but to explicitly say Lyra is Eve, Eve is the cause of all sin, of all this suffering that we see throughout the world, and just really hitting hard that point that it's women's fault just winds me up to no end. And it kind of makes me want to throw this series across the room and never touch it again. As I said, the lack of women in this book is shocking. There's Mary, Mrs. Coulter, Lyra, and I've forgotten her name, the Egyptian lady that was the woman who was her nurse when she was a baby. Arguably, she's a very, very minor side character that we see in the first book and as yet haven't seen again. Of these three women, one of them is supposed to be the main character of the series. However, as I've said before, she is overshadowed by Will and the other male characters in the book. So as I see it, the three women are a child / the origin of all sin and therefore bad, the villain, bad, and the scientist come tempter, kind of bad. Although Lyra and Mary are portrayed as being on the good side, there's still that undertone of religion and perhaps a bit of misogyny that is telling us that these qualities are bad to possess. Lyra's fierceness in the first book was bad to possess, and in the second and third book she was subdued. She came under the care of a boy, Will, who could look after her. We're shown quite clearly that her behaviour is wrong, that her behaviour is not fitting of a girl. And Lyra herself is told that from the get-go. We're also shown Mary, the scientist, the intelligent woman who could be such a good character. She could be so empowering. Instead, she is a woman who isn't really believed when she explains her theories. Hark back to Cassandra. I fear this is a common theme among the portrayal of women. I feel like I am repeating myself a little bit about this. I feel very strongly about it, in case you can't tell. I could go on and on and on about the misogyny in this book and how angry it has made me, especially given how good the first book was, to continue the series only to find all that goodness has been completely reverted. To stop myself rambling on, let's move on to religion. I've already touched on religion a little bit and I won't get back into the whole Eve thing, but generally this series points out the hypocrisy in religion, Christianity. And as I said, as someone who's grown up in religious schools, this is only more obvious to me. I am very cynical about religion. I have washed my hands of it. I've learned enough about it in my childhood to know that it's not really for me. So parts of Pullman's treatment of religion throughout this series do kind of resonate with me. I do feel almost like his cynicism comes across as well, especially in his portrayal of the religious orders in the series that basically decides that the authority or God is the all-power and that everyone should follow a strict set of rules. On the other hand, some of Pullman's treatment of religion suggests that he advocates for it. There's very much a contrast going on. It's all about religion, and it's almost like Pullman is trying to decide what's good and what's bad about it through these opposing sides. So you've got the boards that decide that religion is the be-all and end-all and that everyone has to follow the authority, and then on the other side you've got Lord Asriel and Lyra. I'm still unsure really what they're fighting for, but Lord Asriel is also clearly of a religious mind, but it seems that the two sides believe different things about religion and about the authority. Furthermore, in the third book we meet a couple of angels who explain to us that the authority / God is actually not God but just the first ever angel. That gives you a whole new sense of what is Philip believing. Is he for religion? Is he against it? Does he believe in it? Does he not? The more I read, the more annoyed I get, especially when Lyra is brought into the position of Eve. So not only are these books full of misogyny and questionable religion, they also go downhill in terms of writing. The first book, The Northern Lights, was incredible. I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was well written, I thought the world was unique, and I thought the magic system was also completely unique. It took me on an amazing adventure, and it left me with lots of questions to be answered as well. Once we reach The Subtle Knife, this kind of all goes out the window. In this book, nothing really happens. We follow Will and Lyra around. We're shown the new and improved weak Lyra and the new hero that is Will, just kind of wandering about, not doing a whole lot. It gets quite dramatic in the last 50 pages or so, and that was good, but it was a struggle. It was a real struggle to get there. Finally, in the third book, The Amber Spyglass, or at least the first 210 pages of it, there is a lot more action. I feel like I should want to read this more than I do, given the reason I didn't like the second one was with the lack of action, how boring it was, really. That would imply that this one should be a lot better for me. However, I just can't get over the portrayal of Lyra. I can't get over how Will has just commandeered this series for himself, how all the men of the series are the reason things are happening. Lord Asriel is one side of the battle. Yorick, who is a polar bear, I'll give you that, is still a male character. He's the only one that seems to be able to help Lyra when things go wrong for her. Will is still very much taking charge and deciding what happens, and Lyra seems to have to ask him for permission to do the things she wants to do, regardless of the fact that in the first book she would have gone and done them anyway. I do want to continue this book for the fact of closure and knowing what happens, but I also just really don't want to pick it up and read it. It's such a struggle. And I'm annoyed that it's a struggle because I've put it in this readathon now. All I know is that there was a 24-hour readathon yesterday and I failed miserably because I didn't want to read this book.
Hello, Editing Eleanor here. I'm now on page 370 and determined to get through it, mainly because my good friend Angus is also reading it and encouraging me to catch up with him, so that's great. I'm still pretty angry about some things and I'm still not completely enjoying it, but I'm definitely enjoying it a lot more than I was when I filmed this video. I could ramble about this series for a good while, so if you want to chat about it, then let me know.
This has been a bit of a rambly video. I'm sorry if it might not make much sense. Like I said, I didn't really have a plan for this. I just sort of went for it because I've been so angry at this series. We'll let this one lie. This one was nice. That one's okay. These two, no. I'm unhappy, I'm dissatisfied, and I've had enough of reading them. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on this series, so let me know down in the comments if there's anything you agree with, if there are other things that I've not mentioned that you thought about this series, and whether you liked this style of video, whether it's something you'd like to see in the future. This is the kind of series of videos that I'm interested in doing. I quite like to do a bit of a chatty one about Throne of Glass. As many of you probably know, I love the Throne of Glass series and I recently reread it back to back and I have a lot of thoughts about it now, so I think that would be quite a fun video to film. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was interesting to watch for you and I hope you join me for more videos in the future. I hope everybody is safe, I hope you're all well. Don't forget to leave a comment, like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!